Hey y'all, Jonathan here with Race Kiki's. This week we're going to talk with the fantastically intelligent Dawon Hawkins. We're going to talk about being black in white spaces, namely white queer spaces, and all of the wackiness that may incite. We talk Black Lives Matter, we talk politics, we talk the future. I hope you enjoy and like and subscribe. Thanks a lot. Be awesome.
Cheers.
Oh, cheers indeed. What are you drinking?
It's just water. It's not alcohol. I have one more meeting.
Oh, okay. Because I do all my meetings with a cocktail. That's why they're always after 5 o'clock. Welcome to Race Kiki's with Jonathan Lee Dawon.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Of course. The first question I'm going to ask you, fairly simple. When did you learn about race?
Gosh. I think I was maybe like in the first or second grade.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was in the first or second grade. I grew up in a racially diverse suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, and my first best friend. I remember when I was in first and second grade was a white kid named John, and I knew that we didn't look alike, and there wasn't anything wrong with that. I didn't have any negative connotations about that, but I just fully recognized that we just didn't look alike, I think that's the first point that I became kind of really cognizant of race.
Okay.
I know that's not really juicy, but I mean, that's the God's honest truth.
That's a very honest answer in Cleveland, you say?
Yeah. And I've we moved around a little bit, not a lot, but a couple of times from like elementary school to high school. And when we kind of landed, because I grew up in Cleveland, but then mostly in Maple Heights, which is a southeastern suburb of Cleveland. Mm-hmm. But one of the things about the Cleveland school system was that for the most part, if you lived on the east side of town, you were black. And if you lived on the west side, you were white. And so there was a point where I went to the Cleveland School of Science in middle school. And I was bused to the white side of Cleveland, on the west side, the white side of Cleveland. And it was really interesting, being 11, 12 years old and going from a very racially diverse school system, which is what I had. There were white kids, there were black kids, there were Hispanic kids, there were, Asian kids, there were quite a few different, ethnicities in our elementary school, to a predominantly white school. That was an interesting experience, to say the least. And I think there was also just, that, and being kind of queer, gay, that there was just an element of self-awareness, recognizing that I'm not like other boys. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. And then you add on the layer of, there's like this whole like black, white, or race thing that just exists, because I grew up in the 80s and kind of graduated in the 90s. So I'm more of an 80s child. Mm-hmm. It's just, it kind of fucks with you a little bit.
Yes, it does. Yeah. My memory of my childhood is a little spotty, but I can remember on the last conversation I had, I was talking about an incident where, as a child, I was taken to a plantation, a working plantation in Natchez, Mississippi. That's where my family is from. And I remember being led around this plantation with a class full of brown kids that looked like me, with this young white teacher smiling and saying, she takes us into the house, the plantation home, and the big house. And then she leads us around to the back through some sticks and such. And then she says, this is where you people live. And there were Black people reenacting slaves. And I didn't know how to digest that because I think I was probably 7 years old. And I go home to my mother and I explain, my mother doesn't remember this story, but I explained to her what happened. And I don't remember going back to that teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my introduction to, hey, you're Black and you're in Mississippi. So these are the things that these are the things that are expected of you. Mm-hmm. I can remember being unofficially told that when a white person is walking down the street, you get off the sidewalk. Mm-hmm. Or you cross the street. Mm-hmm. So that was my introduction.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting because as the more that I think about it, my first recollection of being different in terms of, gosh, that's not the right way that I want to phrase it. My first recollection of me being Black, and there was a difference in race, right? In races or colors, because we're all the human race. The difference in color, right? And privilege was, again, you know, when I was quite young and had a, you know, white best friend or whatever. And we weren't friends because of our color. We were just friends because we genuinely liked each other, et cetera. Mm-hmm. But I always remember, since then, very open and honest conversations in my family about race. You know, my grandmother, speaking in Mississippi, my grandmother lived in Huntsville, Alabama, and every summer since before I was born, my family would trek all of us kids. You know, so my aunts and uncles, my mom would go down there every single summer for, you know, vacation and a visit and whatnot. And then when the kids started coming along, the kids would be toted along as well. And for the most part, parents would come, they would stay for a week, they would go back, leave us down there. We would go to vacation Bible school and that whole thing. And then they would come at the end of summer and pick us up and then take us back, you know, ready for school. You know, but throughout all of those years, from being 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, all the way through to my college years, you know, my family always had very open, frank and direct dialogue around, you know, race and how Blacks were treated and the injustices that exist. And I remember from a very young age, things like, you know, you have to be 10 times smarter, 10 times better, you know, 10 times more efficient, more effective, you just have to be better just to get equal. Right. Mm-hmm. I remember that you'd have to work harder. You have to think better. You have to be more creative just to get the same kind of accolades. And so, you know, the idea of racial difference and the idea that just by the fact that I was born with this kind of skin, as beautiful as it is,
absolutely, drink it in.
But the fact that I was born into like this caste, right? You know, it had always been ingrained in me that there was a difference in how I might be treated or how I would be treated, simply because, you know, I'm Black. And so and I've had experiences, you know, that have validated that, you know, and, you know, but it's never not been, it's always been part of the dialogue with my family, ever since I was super, super young. And it still continues to be a dialogue, you know, amongst our family about, you know, what's going on in the world today and how that's impacting us and all of those things. You know, I grew up in the era where, you know, the Huxtables, you know, showed a different caliber of Blackness. And, you know, there are a lot of people that I knew that couldn't relate to that portrayal, you know, of a upper middle class family, Black family, you know, that had a doctor for a parent, a father, and a lawyer for a mother. And I didn't. My parents were um, divorced at a very young age and whatnot, so I didn't grow up in a two-parent household. But both of my parents are very active in my life. So, you know, although that didn't reflect my specific experience, it was. I do remember the dialogue that was happening around that time when that show came out, you know, within the Black communities, right? And, you know, amongst, you know, others, those that aren't in the Black community. So that's just one of the things that sticks out to me in terms of like how dynamic representation can be and how impactful it can be in terms of changing that social narrative around, you know, what does Blackness look like?
Yeah, or what can Blackness look like?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because my mother was a single mother for most of my life. She did an incredible job bringing up 4 fantastic children. Mm-hmm. I was her best. I'm not. Don't even believe that. I have 3 incredibly beautiful, talented, accomplished sisters. They are mothers. They are proud, strong, incredible women. And then there's me. I'm the best of all of it. And I can remember, I have memories of her walking through her life with this grace and this power, knowing that Mississippi is handing her ass every single day. Mm-hmm. I was chatting with her a couple of weeks ago, and she was telling me about she just retired from nursing 3 years ago. Mm-hmm. And most of her career had been spent at the VA Medical Center. Mm-hmm. And she was telling me about the times when veterans would come in and absolutely berate her, calling her everything except a child of God. Mm-hmm. Up to and including spitting on her. Mm-hmm. And she would still come home, beautiful, proud, graceful, and put food on the table for her children, because she knew we had to be better. We had to do something better than that. And I applaud her every single day for that. And the more we chat, the more she's like an onion, a beautiful, I'd rather use rose, because you can unwrap the petals and find more interesting things inside. And it's taken me till 48 to realize how fantastic of a job she did in dragging me into the world. Being as gay as I've always been in Mississippi. And well, we moved around a lot as well. We moved around probably 12 to 14 times.
Okay.
As I was growing up, I remember being in, this is in no particular order, Mississippi, Texas, Washington State, Michigan, perhaps Chicago, I don't remember. And I've lived in a couple of other places as well. I moved here from Colorado, moved to New York from Colorado after living there for 19 years.
How does that degree of inconsistency impact like your childhood and like your, you know, relationship building skills and how you connect with others? And the reason I ask is because one could imagine that it just like, you know, army brats that get drug around the world, you know, it becomes challenging to, you know, to either want to or to cultivate, you know, those meaningful relationships on the precipice that, you know, I could be moving in like a year. So what's the point?
Hmm.
Does any of that resonate with you, or did any of that show up with you in terms of like the relationships, the friendships, and things that you've experienced over those years?
I'm spared a lot of my, again, spared a lot of my childhood memories because of the accident. And I know that in my adult life, that may be why I stayed in Colorado for as long as I did. Because if you ask me, I would tell you I'm from Colorado, even though my family is in Mississippi.
Gotcha.
The majority of my memories are from Colorado.
Mhm.
After when I was 24, was driving down to Colorado Springs to show off a brand new car that my boo had bought me, my brand new boyfriend, because she was a trophy wife, honey. He bought me a brand new car, so I had to go down to Colorado Springs to show it off to my friends who were down there.
Yeah.
So we go down, I go to this club, and I was like, y'all, look at my new car. It was a white convertible cabriolet. You know what a cabriolet is? You know what that is?
Yes.
It was fierce. I loved that car. It was white inside. Everything was white. And here I am driving top down, living my best life. And it was the day after Thanksgiving. And I drive down to this bar and I meet some friends, and they want to go from one bar to the next. But instead of taking my brand new car that my boo had just bought me, these bitches want to take this jalopy piece of shit that my friend had. So we all pile inside. We have one friend driving. I'm in the front passenger seat, and then this fluffy friend of mine was in the back sitting behind me. This is important to the story. That's why I'm putting that particular topic in there. Now, the friend driving is driving his ass off. He decides to run a stoplight. In running the stoplight, we're in a Lincoln, you know those Lincolns with the two doors and that kind of stupid wheel on the back with the slanted hood, the slanted trunk?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, we're in one of those.
Mm-hmm.
So big girl is sitting behind, fluffy friend is sitting behind me. The car, this Toyota Pathfinder, 4x4, I'm sorry, hits the car, front passenger. Big girl, fluffy friend, flies forward, my skinny ass sitting in front. Boom, right into the front of hit the dashboard. My head gets stuck into the windshield.
No.
Yes, queen. I get rushed off to the hospital after they get the jaws of life to get me out of the car. I get to the hospital. My boyfriend has to come down from Denver to take care of it. They're calling my mom in Mississippi. Oh, Miss Girl, what do we do? And she says, oh, well, do the surgery. I had to my jaw was wired shut. I broke my collarbone, dislocated my spine. But what they didn't find out was I also had an undiagnosed concussion that wiped out all of my childhood memories. So I wake up from all of this in a hospital room in Colorado Springs, Colorado. My boyfriend at the time was this beautiful, sweet, young, older white man. And all of the nurses in the room were white. The doctor was white. And I'm in white ass Colorado. Mm-hmm. So for an entire 2 weeks, I wasn't allowed. They chose not to let me look in a mirror.
Oh, yeah.
So I had no real
and no memory
and no concept of blackness. It didn't even register in my head. Mm-hmm. So I'm in this entire time, everyone around me, every doctor I see, every nurse I talk to, every friend I have, every phone call I get, with the exception of my mother, are all from white people. So it's like screwing in my head. I look in the mirror and I see a black face, and I'm like, well, isn't this creative? I then break up with this. I meet somebody at a bar who I thought was going to be a nice friend, also a white fella. He then decides to,
Colorado, so
yeah, he then decides to manipulate his way into my life because I have no real concept of who I am as a person. In 6 months, I've broken up with this boyfriend of mine. And this person and I are now a thing. But what I realize is he is also a right wing Republican, low-key racist.
okay.
And he is feeding me all this vitriol about anti-blackness. He's dropping these little pebbles. Oh yeah, you shouldn't listen to rap music. That's what ghetto people do. You shouldn't do this. That's what blah, blah, blah does. And so this entire time I'm being fed this for about 8 years.
That's not a short time.
And so at one point I'm driving down the street with this man, and I had then started, he and I had like grown apart, and I lived into a different apartment in Colorado. And the entire time, my social circle, my life is still very, very white. Very white. I meet this young friend of mine who's this young Korean kid, and he and I become really fast friends. He's maybe 10 years my junior or somewhere in there. And he confides in me something very, very intimate one evening about, he's all like, look, I just found out I'm dealing with some life sitch. And I was like, oh my God, if you need me, I'm right here. And then this guy I'm with at the time, he says, well, we gotta go. We leave from one bar, we get into his car. We're driving down the street, and my friend, my young Korean friend, calls me. Oh my God, can I come over? I really need to talk. I'm saying, he's just bawling on the phone. This guy I'm with, who's driving, takes the phone out of my hand and throws it out the window. He then looks at me and says, why don't you just shut the fuck up and let me control your life like I'm supposed to? I said to him, it's like, I need you to stop the car right now before I become the kind of black person you think I am. What does that mean? Stop the car before I become the kind of black person you think I am. Pulls over the car. I get out. I don't ever want to talk to you again, or whatever this is done. I closed the door. I went and ruffled around in the grass to find my flip razor phone that was pink because I needed it. I called my friend. He comes over, and that particular friend has been in my life for years now. And it took friends like that to help me see a part of myself that I was very, very damaged. And through that damage, to deal with that damage, I became very mean. Mm-hmm. Well, I won't say mean. I just have a very acute sense of detail. I pay attention to absolutely everything every time I meet someone. And I have an innate ability to find your weak point, and I use it against you in words. And I did that for many, many, many years because I was a hurt person, so I had to hurt people. Yeah. Then I left Colorado and I came here because between me breaking up with my my first boyfriend, who I was with when I broke my jaw, and this other fella, I became HIV positive. Mm-hmm. So then that was this whole, oh my God, no one's going to want me. I'm just going to die and blah, 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 blah. So why not just move to New York and die there? Mm-hmm. So I came here. been here for almost 10 years. I guess I'm not going to die, so may as well explore being Black now.
Thank goodness for that. Yeah. What an incredible journey of, self-discovery, right? I mean, to be able to look back on those circumstances and, have some degree of objectivity to recognize like what impacted you and what part you played in allowing those things to impact you. And then, furthermore, what have you learned since then? I mean, that's incredible. And things could have turned, taken a turn for, a completely different path for yourself. So amazing.
I could be a gay Black Republican.
In Colorado.
You
might have been one of those ones storming the Capitol.
Well, I was a gay Black Republican when I was with that fella.
The interesting thing about it is, and no shade to like true Republicans, because quite frankly, there is Republican ideology, and then there's right-wing conservatism that is kind of now the face of the Republican Party, which is a little bit
unfortunate. It's absolutely disgusting, because we need both, at least two parties to balance one another out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go on.
No, that was it. It's just, it's unfortunate that, that's the experience that we have today from a political perspective. So, but look at you now, you're in New York, you're thriving as much as one can in the midst of the pandemic and, our New York experience. And, you're able to kind of look back on those circumstances and say, that, wow, that was tough, but it didn't break me, but rather it fueled me to be the person I am today. And that's pretty incredible.
I appreciate that. And I think that it gives me a very unique perspective about this whole race thing, because I think it's so stupid. The more I'm talking about things like this, I cannot believe so many super smart people believe such dumb things. And I want to speak to you about a little bit about, well, shall I say, you mentioned something earlier that I wanted to ask you about, where you transferred schools and you were a Black face in a all white space. How did that feel?
Really weird. And again, it's compounded by the fact of my queerness. I don't know if others feel this way, but I've spent the majority of my life being very introspective as a result of my own queerness, so like that I felt different because I was queer more so than because I was Black.
Oh.
So it's a very, for me, and I'm sure everybody's a snowflake, so everybody's completely different, right? And beautiful. But everybody has a different experience. And I remember like the thing that brought me more shame, doesn't now, but was the idea of being queer than it was being Black. Black was a close second, but in terms of like just navigating life, that was a thing that was the most challenging for me, at least in like my early, like educational formative years. So going to that school, going to the School of Science was really it was really interesting because, here I am, 10, 11, 12, I think. And, I'm being bused to, this school that's going to provide me with a focus in, mathematics and sciences, which I was really interested in at the time. I was also a very artistic and creative kid. So I had my choice between going to the School of Arts or going to the School of Science. And probably had I gone to the School of Arts, I probably wouldn't have had as much agita about my queerness, besides, as opposed to going to the School of Science, which there just wasn't a lot of, really artistic expression happening there. It's more about intellectual, pursuit of knowledge and facts and all that shit. But yeah, it's just an interesting thing being thrust into an environment where you feel every bit of a minority, where your other, whatever that is, doesn't align with the majority that is there. And doing that at a time in one's life when they're going through puberty, there's all kinds of things happening internally that you just don't understand. Your body is really weird. There's just that's such a vulnerable stage of transition in a kid's life, to then also go through that experience of, not seeing other people that are like you. I was able to, I think, make a decent kind of existence out of it, in sense of, I had folks that I was friendly with, but I was also bussed. So it's not like we hung out after school. It was really like, okay, I'm going to my social studies class and I get to sit next to so-and-so, and we kind of vibe. And, I have, PE with, so-and-so and so-and-so, and we have lunch right after that. So we get like 2 whole hours or 2.5 hours of being together before we go to our next classes, and we won't see each other until tomorrow or whatever. So it was a really weird kind of experience. I kind of liken it to when I went away to college, right? Because, you completely detach from, like, I went away to school, even though my school was like 40 minutes away from my home. I lived on campus. So it was a completely isolating experience. So what was happening on campus was happening on campus. And then, when I went home, just like when I went home from school, it was a completely different vibe going on, because my brother didn't go to that. I have an older brother and a younger sister. My brother and my younger sister, they didn't go to that school. I was the only one. Oh. So they were going to like their, regular schools with all their regular friends and all that stuff. And here I was kind of in this new environment because, I had the opportunity and the interest in a different kind of education. And being thrust into an environment where the majority of folks were white, it just compounded my otherness. And so I think for a large part of those years, I retreated a lot within myself, internalized a lot. And I don't think that I really had the opportunity to feel, and I never really talked about this with my parents or, anything. And it never came up in a sense that I felt like I didn't want to continue it. Like I just recognized that it was a situation where I was the odd man out, but I also recognized that I was odd man out. My parents knew that I was an odd man out because of my race, but what I knew was I was the odd man out because of my race and, my sexual orientation.
Did that cause you to kind of disappear? And what I mean by
I think so. I think I became hyper. I hyper internalized a lot. Whereas I think a lot of people, like I look at my brother, my sisters, and like my friends and whatnot. Like I think those years, people come into who they are. I don't think I was able to come into who I was until I actually came out, which was, well into my early 20s.
Really?
So, Oh yeah. Now I'm an outgoing person, very social individual. I tend to make friends pretty easily, but underneath all of that, underneath that outgoingness, right, there is still this element of, for all those years, I'm not able to share like the fullness of who I am with the people that I care about or the people I'm spending time with, because again, not because of my Blackness, but because of my queerness, that was such a frightening thing to grow up in the 80s and 90s, in the midst of the AIDS epidemic, and, hearing about all the misinformation that trickled its way into, middle America, Ohio, right? Not to say that we were ass backwards, but there was just a lot of misinformation that was out there. And, there was just a lot of fear around like what queerness meant. And so, and certainly not virtually any acceptance specifically within the Black community. So in a way, I think I learned how to compartmentalize my life. So I had my home life with my Black family. I had my school life, with, I guess, my white community, if you will. I wasn't out at that point. So, and I wasn't like sexually active at that point either. So, but then, I'd have like I would, I remember I couldn't wait to get home to watch like the talk shows where I get to see like gay people and drag queens and, like this was like, and like The Real World and things like that showed queer people and in various different lights. So that was compartmentalized. It was just that's what I learned how to do, which was to compartmentalize my life through that experience, because I was, I had these other things and I was in this space of being other, and, it took me a long time to kind of unlearn some of that behavior.
Interesting. Now, why not better question. What spurred the 20s coming out?
So I left for college at 18. Okay. And I had made it up in my mind. Part of the reason for me moving onto campus, and not living in my childhood home, was I wanted to come out. I was like, interestingly enough, I went to the School of Science for middle school. Then I went back to like regular high school. I didn't want to do that anymore. I went back to regular high school. And then I decided when I went to college that I was going to pursue fashion design.
Okay.
I was still straight. So, I was not passing straight by any stretch of the measure, but I was still like, I was still DLing that life. I had a long-term girlfriend, for 4 years, well into a couple years into last 2 years of high school, first 2 years of college. So, I was hoping to kind of escape that, but I couldn't figure out how to break up with my girlfriend without like breaking her heart. So I continued to play that whole thing out. And then I remember, in my sophomore year of college, my girlfriend, my then longtime girlfriend that didn't do anything with, we had a good old fashioned Christian relationship.
Christian.
very Christian. Chaste. Chaste. But she ended up breaking up with me. And when that happened, I was sad, because it was like, oh, I won't have her as a friend, but now I can be gay.
Right.
And that to me was like the onset for me to actually live like my fullest, truest life and start to figure out how am I going to make that happen. Because I was put on a 2-year hiatus because I couldn't figure out how to, dump my girlfriend. Right. My high school girlfriend, who, by the way, was still at home in Maple Heights while I was living on campus. Like it was a jacked up situation. But that was the catalyst.
You don't have to answer this if you don't want to. I'm just curious. When you kicked out that closet door and you came to the world, when you went to find your first conquest, was he a Black guy?
No. My first boyfriend, the first guy that I slept with, and we ended up dating for like 6 months or something like that, was a white guy named John. He was 35, a a smoker, which I did not like,
Mm-hmm.
and ended up being a raging alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
And I ended up dumping him on on Valentine's Day, actually. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that he was a raging alcoholic to begin with, or whatever. If everything was fine or whatever, but but after a while, it just got kind of like, I was like, okay, you're saying some really fucked up shit, and you always get like this when you're drunk, and that's just not the kind of experience that I want to be in. Blah 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 blah. So that ended. But I didn't pursue like a white relationship. And I think that's important. The first gay bar that I went to was, I don't even know if it's still around. It's called the Interbelt. It's in Akron, Ohio. So that was closer to the school that I was going to. And that's where all the kids that were in the arts major. So fashion design, architecture, graphic design, marketing and all that kind of fun stuff. They went to that bar. So I knew of it because one of the guys in my fashion fundamentals class did drag and invited us to go to that bar to watch him do drag. And that was my first time going to a gay bar. Okay. I came back that summer after school because my girlfriend had broken up with me and said, I'm going out. And out to this bar. First time I went out to the gay bar by myself, I sat in my car for like 45 minutes, just mustering up the courage to go in there. I didn't talk to anybody except for the bartender. I went in and, got a beer and blah, blah, blah. But then I think next couple of times I went out, had some conversations, and then I met this guy, and, that was like my first time having sex. And I think that does something to you when you're, when you're a virgin and, and you're also on the verge of, coming out and trying to figure out what does all that mean and blah, blah, blah. But I think the other point of it is that it is much more common for Black individuals to be especially queer individuals, to be thrust into mostly white spaces, because those are the spaces that have been made available and accessible to us.
Exactly.
I grew up in a neighborhood where I didn't know when I was coming out. I didn't know anything about the gay life. I knew some things, but I didn't know like where the gay bars are. We didn't have like Google way back then. You had the internet, but like it wasn't the same kind. You'd have to go to a gay bar at this point to find out what's going on in the gay community. You had to go to a gay establishment, pick up one of them little magazines, and scour those magazines to find out what are the other places that you can go.
I remember them. I remember them well. You'd get them. Oh, girl, this happened on Tuesday night. We can go. Thursday night we're gonna go here. On Friday we're gonna go here, here, and here because
that was the internet. That was the internet back then. So, for all the young dolls that are like, how did he not know what was going on? We don't have the same kind of internet. We didn't have the same kind of internet that you guys had. So for me, it was out by association. So I knew of that one gay bar that I went to because one of my classmates had invited us to go to that one gay bar, or whatever. And I went to that gay bar. So that was going to be the first gay bar that I go to when, I decided to do it on my own, blah, blah, blah. And then continued to drive from my house all the way down to Akron to go out until I discovered other bars that were a little bit closer to home. But those mostly were white bars. They weren't like in the Black neighborhoods at all. They were mostly like in, some of them were in Black neighborhoods, but they were mostly white bars, in part because how the neighborhoods go. They move into they gentrify Black neighborhoods.
Yes.
They can have a space, and there's a congregation, so there's safety in numbers, etc. And there's usually a bar that's there, but you did not see a lot of Black people going there. So it's usually like one or two Black people, and the rest of the people that you see in that bar might be like 200 people, or it might be 45 people, but the rest of the people are going to be white.
Yeah, that sounds like Colorado. I remember my first bar was this bar called the Penthouse Lounge. It was in a strip mall in Colorado Springs when I was in the Army. And when I got to Fort Carson, where I was stationed, they gave us a list of places we were not allowed to go. The Penthouse Bar was on this list. And my friends are all like, that's where the fags go. Because they kept using the F word. That's where they go. That's where they go. And I say, oh, I see. So here I am, get in my little car, and I drive there. And I go drive to the bar. And I sit in the parking lot for an hour. And I sat there. And I started my car up and I drove away. The next weekend, drive to the bar again, sit in the car. I remember this because I was wearing some blue jeans and a fitted shirt. And at that time, I was 21 years old and I weighed a whopping 125 pounds with a 26-inch waist. You couldn't tell me nothing. Anyway, well, you could tell me I needed a sandwich, but other than that, you couldn't tell me nothing. So I walk in, all angles, but I'm so scared. And at that time, apparently I was shy. Since the accident, apparently I'm not so shy anymore, but I was shy, so I walk into the bar and I went and ordered my little cocktail. Now, I did not have my first drink until I was 21 years old.
Same.
And what was your first drink?
Long Island iced tea.
Oh, drinking like a whore. Drinking like a hoe.
I had two of those and I drove home. I don't know how I made it home alive.
No, neither.
Long Island iced tea. Oh my gosh.
At the time, I was drinking amaretto sour because alcohol was too strong for me. I didn't like the taste because the first thing that I ever ordered was a whiskey and soda or some shit like that because I saw it on a movie. And the girl was all like, and I was like, ooh. She says, baby, drink this. It tastes like syrup. She says, yeah, amaretto sour. So that's what I was drinking. Went to the bar, ordered my amaretto sour, and I'm just sitting there and I'm sipping and I'm looking around and I'm in the corner and I'm a dark skinned man. So it's dark. And, if I close my eyes, I can disappear. But within 5 minutes of me being there, 6 or so white gentlemen at various times came sliding up beside, and they were always dramatically older than I. Promising me the moon and the stars and you don't have to work, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do that, blah, 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 all of this. I had a sugar daddy when I was a young gay, but he kept paging me every 10 minutes asking where I was. I was like, the same place I was 10 minutes ago. And he's like, well, when I paid you, blah, blah, blah. I was like, you can take your money back. You can take this car back. You can take all of this back because you do not own me because slavery ended. Right. Slave, that's not a thing anymore. You don't have the right to own me. Oh, Colorado. Love it so nicely.
One of these days, we'll have to have a conversation about the fetishization. That's a tough word for me to say.
It's a tough word for anybody to say.
Yeah, fetishizing of black men, particularly by those who treat them that kind of way.
I can't wait to have that conversation. It's been a topic of mine for years now, actually, because I'm going to say something, and I don't mean it all self-absorbed as I feel, but I know what the fuck I look like. And I get a lot of, when I was a much younger person, I would get a lot of unwanted, unnecessary attention and bring me that BBD, that ghetto hood fantasy, this whole version of black that you expect my dark skin would present you. And often it is always when that energy is given to me, because I've spoken the way that I speak, I've spoken this way my entire life. So I never really had to come out, is what I'm telling you. And so when it's met with this, when people are confronting me expecting the ghetto, I don't like using that word. Either way, you know what I'm trying to say.
Stereotype, right?
Yes, the stereotypical dark-skinned Black man, and I present you with this. It's always a novelty. It's always, oh, he's so safe. He's so, oh, well, I can say this. Now you're going to be my best friend. You're my new Black friend. And then I get asked the stupid ass questions like, do Black people tan? And if I cut you, is your blood red? Because someone asked me that before. And I didn't understand if that was even a real question. So that brings me to, let's talk about walking around as a Black face in white spaces. Thoughts?
You know, my perspective of this has evolved over time. There was a point where I personally felt the pressure to bear the representation on my shoulders. So being the best, being smart, being reliable, being one who can get shit done, fill in blanks. It was part of like that the Black pride, of being able to step in and show up in ways that really shined. And so like the fear of letting my family down or leaving a negative taste in people's mouths about, just like me as a Black person, like I had this fear of reinforcing certain kinds of stereotypes. I've since let a lot of that go. I think that the narrative, my internal narrative has changed dramatically, but I think the narrative broadly has changed dramatically. Being a Black person in white spaces, we no longer have to, I think we have the language and the inclination to say to others, we are not monolithic. I am not the representation of my race. What I like is what I as an individual like, not what anybody else likes. We don't all know each other. Like we are not one thing. So I do feel like there is like that, and there's that perspective that we now bring to the table when we're in those spaces. I think also externally, we've seen a lot of dialogue around, just what behavior should others who are not Black be demonstrating and should be avoiding, right? In reference to us specifically. And so, there's a very interesting conversation that's happening within Black communities around, what role do we play in teaching the oppressor? And it's a hot debate. Probably not one that we'll get into tonight, but there's just this whole conversation around, if you are a person that is being oppressed, is it your responsibility? Are you obligated? Are you responsible? Are you accountable for teaching people how to treat you in this kind of way, right? Or teaching them how to be better, in some instances. And I teeter a lot on that spectrum. One, because my job is to do that.
To do exactly that.
Yeah, I work for DocuSign. I'm director of inclusive talent development. My job is to basically teach people how to not be assholes, and to create and that's a very crude way of saying that, but It's to create, how do we all contribute to creating an inclusive environment where people have the ability to bring the fullness of themselves, the fullness of their professional selves, let's put it that way. Because I always say that there are parts of myself that are not professional that I shouldn't be bringing to work. But that's
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but that's my job. That's my day job. So my day job is to, like, to help teach people how to be allies, and what are some tips and tricks to, create an inclusive environment on their teams, and how to seek out and embrace collaboration and spirit of hiring practices and collaboration with other departments and working with other people, whether they're, teammates or direct reports or leaders, whatever that is. So part of my day job is to do that. But, in life, I am of the mindset that there has been enough groundwork laid, by so many prolific people in our community, not just, spiritual leaders, but, educators, writers, novelists, politicians, and, civil rights leaders, et cetera. There's enough information that is out there that it's no longer my responsibility to draw the line in the sand to say this is acceptable and this is not acceptable. Now, my job is to work either within the system or outside the system to influence policy that protects our ability, or provides for our ability, to have equal rights and equal experience under the laws of the land. Like that's where I stand. And so it's interesting being a Black person in all white spaces, because we are, whether it's virtual or not, we are confronted with things like microaggressions. We're confronted with ignorance, and some of it's willful, but others it's just, I don't know what I don't know. Mm-hmm. We're confronted with that. And so, I think it's important for people to, and not just at work, this is like in gay life, and going out to bars, if you're dating, you're on apps, if you're, like in social events, you join some kind of like, queer sports league, like it happens everywhere. Interactions happen everywhere. And I think it's important for individuals to figure out where on that spectrum do they fall. Mm-hmm. And I think the thing that I always say is, we all have a ministry, right? I know my ministry is not as outside of the professional context where my coins are coming from, because I am not going to teach somebody without, getting paid for it.
Right.
So if you are not going to learn on your own, then we don't have anything to do with one another. You can stay over there. I will stay over here. I will continue to do my part to make sure that, our rights are protected and or are insured, but I'm not going to spend time, teaching you. However, if you are a friend, if you're somebody that I care about or whatever, and you're coming from a place of, I just don't know where to begin. Of course, I will lean in, but to strangers, for me, that's not my ministry. For others, that may be that may be the thing that they are driven and encouraged internally to and externally to do for the greater good. I just don't roll that way. And I think that both of those things are perfectly okay.
And I think that they're both perfectly okay as well. I'm kind of teetering personally. I'm under the mindset that when I see it, when I hear it, I say something. And the reason why I say something, and it has nothing to do with the white person in front of me. Absolutely nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with the fact that if they continue to walk around saying what they're saying, and they run into someone that's not me, and that person may react in a different way than I am, and I'm concerned for that person. I'm not concerned for the white person.
Yeah.
I'm concerned for the brother or sister that looks like me, who may react to to your ignorant whatever ignorant thing comes out of your mouth.
Yeah. I
And
do believe. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
no,
Go
well, I was going to say that when there are times when I hear things and I don't say a word because I want something to pop off.
ahead.
Because I know you're going to say something to the wrong person and they are going to fuck you up.
Mhm.
And you're going to deserve it.
Mhm. I mean, the law of, the law of attraction and cause and effect, right? So, there are some people, that are like it's above me now, like there are people that, okay, when you do something wrong, it's just like, okay, well, like they rise above it and they act in a different kind of way. But that doesn't mean that that's going to be every person. And even when we take blackness out of it, we think about things like gender expression, personal identity, economic wealth, like all these other factions that make up who we are. Like some people will, are built in a certain way that will provide teachable moments. Others will, are avoidance, and more or less where I fall. I don't have time unless I'm getting,
Unless you're paying me. Yes.
Right.
Show me the money.
You're gonna pay me to teach you.
You're going to pay me.
Right. So you ain't getting none of this for free. You can watch TV, you can, read a book, but not this. Or you're gonna get somebody who, their ministry is to pop off. You're gonna say the wrong thing.
And somebody will whoop that ass.
And at the end of the day, in all those situations, people get what they deserve.
Mm-hmm.
You can't control how somebody reacts to you.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not advocating for violence by any stretch of the measure, but what I'm saying is the reality of it is that when somebody is behaving a certain kind of way with me versus with you versus somebody else, they are likely to get 3 completely different outcomes. And that's the risk that they take.
Mm-hmm.
That's the risk that they take. Acting out of ignorance, acting out of, out of superiority, acting out of whatever it is that's driving them to act in that kind of way.
Out of pain. You're acting out of pain and fear is what it's actually boiling down to. You're scared because you feel inadequate, because you've had all of your entire life walking around being mediocre when we're over here thriving. Yeah. And we're over here glistening. And you're in your mediocrity and you're upset by us glistening. And now what?
Yeah.
But that's a conversation that I'm going to go into tomorrow. I'm going to let go on.
No, I agree with that sentiment. I think there is something to be said about, and it probably takes a smarter person than I to articulate this better. But we are in the midst of a pretty significant power transition.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just not talking about politically. I'm talking about what's happening just, in the ethnic makeup of, this particular country. Mm-hmm. And for the longest time, you've had all messages reinforce the idea, that white is right. And and now when you look at messages that you see today, whether it's, in our advertising and our television and our music industry and faith ministry and in politics, and you look up, who's in the boardrooms and who's on the tow trucks, you look around this country and you're starting to see that the makeup of this country and the opportunities afforded to people within this country have diversified. Mm-hmm. And this notion that that somehow, because we're asking for equality, we're asking for more than what we're due, or we're asking for like a bigger share of the pie, as if equality was somehow finite, right?
Exactly.
So there is, and again, like I said, I'm not probably the smartest tool in the toolkit to be able to articulate this, but I kind of liken this a little bit to as a queer person coming out,
Mm-hmm.
right? We have our whole lives that culminate up to a certain kind of point to which we have enough courage to embrace who we are for what we are and say, I'm going to live my truth, right? In whatever way that manifests. We then go to our loved ones, right? After we've done all the soul searching, all the bargaining, all of the, the grieving, and finally got to a place of acceptance, right? And then we go to our loved ones and we say, here I am, see me, love me, appreciate me. And then some of us get that. Most of us, at least from my era and before, did not get that immediately. I was fortunate enough, that, I had parents that really accepted, my truth and my reality, but it took them time to adjust. And the reason I'm drawing this correlation is because, I think I hope your listeners don't drag me for filth. I've already articulated that this is not the perfect analogy. So it's not a one-to-one, but because the atrocities that are being forced upon people of color by white people, particularly in this country, is worse than our own, non-self-acceptance. So I understand that it's not a direct correlation, but what I'm trying to articulate is that in so much as Black, brown, other people are, and queer people, and I'm using that in the broadest sense, LGBTQIA plus people are recognizing and advocating for equality in the absence of equality, right? There is an adjustment that is happening with white people, specifically cis white people. And they're fighting against it because in some way, there is this feeling like because we're doing this, we are taking something from them, right? And in some ways, we are. We're taking away their ability to be more blatant or not so blatant or subtle, racist, and treating us like sub-citizens. And so, yes, that's coming away. So you're going to have to adjust. Problem of it is, or not the problem, in so much as that is happening, that's for y'all to figure out. I'll speak for myself, I am unapologetically Black.
Absolutely.
I'm unapologetic about my queerness. I'm unapologetic about what I bring to the table, and I'm unapologetic about how I will be treated. And so if you, whoever you is, it can't deal with that, that's an issue that you're going to have to figure out on your own.
And you need to sit over there while doing so.
Yeah, because apparently Dawon and Jonathan are not the ones for you to bring that stuff to. But there is that thing that's happening. That thing is happening, and I don't have sympathy for for those folks. I understand it, but I don't have sympathy.
I think. You know what? I do, because in their mind, I have sympathy for them like I have sympathy for a 7-year-old who fell on his knee for doing something stupid. It's like, I feel like I need to put you in, I'm not going to throw you away, but I need you to put you in timeout to figure out what the hell how you played your part in this. And realize that this is bigger than you. This is bigger. This isn't about you. This is about everyone, including you. But it's not just about you. So sit down somewhere and relax while the grown-ups are talking. And that's where I can't, the empathetic human inside of me can't wash my hands of it, because I know that deep down somewhere, somebody has failed these poor, unfortunate people, and it may actually be themselves. They may be the ones that failed themselves, but there was a failure somewhere. And
the system failed them, because although white people today do not own slaves in that kind of sense, they still significantly benefit from a system, that has prioritized whiteness over blackness. And so,
Absolutely.
while I recognize that is a struggle, for me anyways, this is where my compartmentalization comes in, because if I start spending my time sympathizing on them, right, then, and this is just how I'm wired, that's less resources that I'm spend focusing on what do I need to do to continue to fight for our equality. Because it'll be very easy for me to fall into, okay, well, how then can I help? Because now I have sympathy. That's just how I'm wired. So like,
I got that.
I cut that shit off. I say, nope, no.
Yeah.
Brown and blackness gets all of my time.
Yeah, it gets all of my time. I have sympathy for them, though. I do. I have sympathy. I was like,
good. Somebody needs to.
I'm rooting for them. But I'm here for all Black every day.
Yeah.
But not at the expense of everyone else. I believe that we can all glow. We can all be exactly the humans that we aspire to be. And everyone can. It's not an either or. We all can.
I believe that. And that's where it boils down to, like, what's your ministry? And I think people need to, take stock of, and whether that terminology works for you or not. It works for me. What's that?
I'm stealing that.
Yeah, I just, I think people need to figure out where do they stand on the line, because, I struggled a lot with, I don't do a lot of like community service. I didn't do any of the marches at all. I am not a front lines kind of guy.
Me either.
I'm really risk averse, unless I have to be protective. Like, she can fight, so she knows how to protect oneself. But at the end of the day, I'm more of an avoidant. So, I felt a lot of shame personally, not externally, but personally, a lot of shame about, wow, people are doing all these really great things prior to this year. But going into this year, as these things were happening, was just like, I had to recognize that my ministry is not on the front line. That's not where I, like, if you can't do it authentically, not just because it's trending, not just because everybody else is doing, like, I don't give a shit what everybody else for the most part is doing. But I just want to make sure that whatever I'm doing, I'm authentic with it. And I wasn't like, for me to like, start looking at like, oh, well, where are all the protests going to be and blah, blah, blah. Like, that's great that there are people that are out there doing that, and we need that. And we need other people doing other things too. We need people that are, I spent a lot of time this summer supporting Black businesses. Like, from a financial standpoint, I started moving my finances out of things that are, that are like big box and white to more boutique and Black. Like, I'm reinvesting in the community and my talents and my resources in a way that I feel demonstrates my commitment to our community. We need people on the front lines, just like we need people on the back lines. And I think, as hopefully folks that are listening to this, start to, ask themselves, like, what are the things that you are authentically driven to, and don't feel shame for not posting that Black square on Instagram, or, being at, some protest, if that's not how you're wired. But the question is, figure out, how are you wired, and how do you make a difference in whatever way that you choose to do it. Just lean into that and do it from an authentic spirit. And as long as people do that, then, there's no shame. There's no shame, because once you recognize that everybody has a different way of contributing to our greater society, and everyone as a snowflake contributes differently in meaningful ways, then your contribution matters, no matter how insignificant you may think it is.
I absolutely agree with that. I do. You know what, Dawon? This was a fantastic chat.
Yeah.
This was great.
I know. We need to do another one.
No, we're talking about this fetish thing. I already have it on my list. Yeah, you and I would, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.